The sound of my wife's laughter drifting through our bedroom window at 11:30 on a Tuesday night wasn't unusual. What made my wrench slip and scrape across my knuckles was that she was supposed to be asleep, and I was outside fixing my truck in our driveway in Cranebrook, Massachusetts, a town where everyone knows your business before you do. I listened closer. Lila's voice carried that musical quality it used to have when we were dating, back when I thought I was the only one who could make her sound like that. "No, you haven't changed at all," she was saying into her phone. "Still the same charming troublemaker from Jefferson High." My stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. I'm Miles Harwood, 45 years old, and I've been married to Lila for 22 years. I work as a financial analyst for Berkshire Municipal Services, crunching numbers for water treatment facilities and road maintenance budgets. It's not glamorous, but it pays well enough to keep us comfortable in our aging colonial house with the creaky floors and the neighbors who wave from their windows while mentally cataloging your every move. Lila runs a travel consultancy called Wanderlust Solutions from a sleek office downtown. She books luxury trips for wealthy clients who want to find themselves in Tuscany or reconnect with nature in Costa Rica. The irony wasn't lost on me that my wife spent her days planning other people's escapes. I'd been noticing changes in her behavior for about 2 months. Small things at first. She'd started talking about old classmates she'd reconnected with on social media, mentioning names I didn't recognize from the stories she used to tell about high school. Her phone, which used to sit carelessly on kitchen counters and coffee tables, now lived in her purse or pocket. She'd started buying lingerie that appeared in our bedroom with tags still attached. "Just saw it on sale and couldn't resist," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her business trips had become longer and more frequent. 3-day conferences stretched into week-long networking opportunities. She'd return home with that glow people get from good vacations, even though she claimed to have spent most of her time in hotel conference rooms. But it was the way she looked at her phone that really got to me. She'd smile at messages she never shared, typing responses with the kind of focused attention she used to reserve for me. When I'd ask who she was texting, she'd give vague answers about work stuff or just Sally, referring to her best friend Sally Morse, who lived across town with her husband and 2 teenage sons. Standing in my driveway with grease under my fingernails and my wife's voice floating down from our bedroom window, I felt like the last person to figure out a joke everyone else had been laughing at for months. "I keep thinking about that night at Miller's Lake," Lila was saying. "Do you remember? We talked until sunrise about all the places we'd go together." Miller's Lake. I knew that name. Lila had mentioned it before. Some spot where the popular kids used to hang out during high school. She'd never taken me there, claiming it held too many complicated memories. I closed the hood of my truck as quietly as possible and walked around to the back of the house, where I could hear more clearly without being seen. "Conrad, you can't say things like that," Lila was saying, but her voice held no real protest. "I'm married. I have a daughter in college." Conrad. The name hit me like a physical blow. Conrad Hale had been Lila's high school boyfriend, the golden boy athlete she'd dated senior year before they went to different colleges and naturally drifted apart, or so she'd always told me. I'd heard stories about him over the years, usually when Lila had been drinking wine and feeling nostalgic. He'd been the captain of the football team, prom king, the kind of guy who peaked in high school and spent the rest of his life trying to recapture that glory. I know, Lila continued. But seeing you again brought back so many feelings I thought I'd buried. When you kissed me in that hotel lobby, it was like being 18 again. My legs went weak. I sat down hard on our back porch steps, the wood creaking under my weight. They'd kissed. My wife had kissed another man, and from the sound of it, she was planning to do more than that. The conference in Hartford was just an excuse, she admitted. I wanted to see you. I needed to know if what we had was real or just teenage fantasy. Hartford. She'd been in Hartford 2 weeks ago for what she'd called a boring travel industry conference. She'd come home with stories about tedious seminars and bad hotel food. But now I remembered how she'd seemed energized, almost glowing, when she walked through our front door. "No, Miles doesn't suspect anything," she said, and hearing my own name made my chest tighten. "He's been so buried in work lately, I don't think he'd notice if I grew a second head. He's a good man, but we've been more like roommates than lovers for years now." Roommates. 22 years of marriage, and that's how she saw us. I thought about our daughter Danny, 20 years old and in her junior year at UMass Amherst, studying communications and spending most of her time posting cryptic messages on social media about toxic family dynamics and settling for less than you deserve. I'd always assumed she was talking about her friends' relationships, but now I wondered if she'd picked up on tensions between Lila and me that I'd been too blind to see. "I have to go," Lila said. "But Conrad, I meant what I said earlier. These feelings between us, they never really went away, did they?" I heard the soft click of her phone closing, followed by the creak of our bedroom floorboards as she moved around upstairs. A few minutes later, the house fell silent. I sat on those back porch steps for another hour, staring at the dark shapes of our neighbor Rick Weather's house next door. Rick was in his 50s, recently divorced, and had developed an annoying habit of documenting neighborhood activities with his new camera, a hobby that had earned him a reputation as the town busybody. The smart thing would have been to confront Lila immediately, to march upstairs and demand explanations. But I've always been a planner, someone who thinks through problems before acting. It's what makes me good at my job, analyzing municipal budgets and finding inefficiencies that save taxpayers money. So instead of confronting her, I decided to gather information. The next morning, I watched Lila get ready for work with new eyes. She spent longer than usual on her makeup, choosing a red lipstick I'd never seen before. Her outfit was professional but flattering, a black dress that hugged her curves and made her look younger than her 43 years. "You look nice," I said over my coffee. She smiled, but it felt performative. "Thanks. I have a client meeting today, someone interested in a European river cruise. Anyone I know?" "I doubt it. New client from Springfield. Sally referred them." Sally again. I made a mental note to pay more attention to Lila's friendship with Sally Morse. They'd been close since college, bonding over their shared ambition and their frustration with small-town life. Sally worked in marketing for a regional healthcare company, and had always struck me as the type of person who thrived on drama and gossip. After Lila left for work, I did something I'd never done in 22 years of marriage. I went through her personal belongings. Her laptop was password protected, but I knew her passwords, variations of our anniversary date, and Danny's birthday. What I found made my stomach turn. Her browser history showed frequent visits to Conrad's gym website. Hale's Fitness had opened 3 years ago in a converted warehouse downtown, catering to serious athletes and fitness enthusiasts. The website featured professional photos of Conrad, who had maintained his high school physique better than I'd maintained mine. He was still handsome in that clean-cut, all-American way that had made him popular in high school. But more damaging than the website visits were the social media messages I found when her tablet automatically synced to my laptop, a feature we'd set up years ago to share photos and documents, back when we trusted each other completely. The conversation thread between Lila and Conrad went back 3 months. Conrad: "Lila Harwood, I can't believe I found you on here. You look exactly the same as you did senior year." Lila: "Conrad Hale, I heard you opened a gym, still the athlete I see." Conrad: "Some things never change. I saw you're in the travel business now. Living the dream?" Lila: "Something like that. It's complicated. The early messages were innocent enough, catching up on careers and families. Conrad had been married briefly in his 20s, but divorced with no children. He'd bounced between jobs before opening the gym, which he described as his last shot at building something meaningful. But as the weeks progressed, their conversations became more personal. Lila: do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't broken up? Conrad: only about once a week for the past 25 years. Lila: I think about that night at Miller's Lake sometimes. You said we'd travel the world together. Conrad: we could still do that. It's not too late. Lila: I'm married, Conrad. I have responsibilities. Conrad: are you happy, though? Really happy? That question seemed to unlock something in Lila. Her responses became longer, more revealing. Lila: I love Miles, but we've grown apart. He's content with his routine. Work, home, weekend projects around the house. I feel like I'm suffocating sometimes. I plan these amazing trips for other people, but I haven't been anywhere exciting in years. Conrad: you deserve better than that. You were always meant for bigger things. Lila: you think so? Conrad: I know so. Remember how we used to talk about opening that adventure travel company? You'd plan the trips, I'd lead the outdoor activities. We made such a good team. Lila: that was a long time ago. Conrad: doesn't mean it was wrong. The messages continued for weeks, growing more intimate and nostalgic. Conrad shared details about his struggling gym, how he'd invested everything into it but was barely breaking even. Lila offered sympathy and encouragement, telling him how proud she was of his ambition. Then came the message that changed everything. Conrad: I'm going to be in Hartford next month for a fitness expo. I know it's crazy, but would you want to meet for dinner? Just as friends to catch up properly. Lila: I shouldn't. Conrad: one dinner. What's the harm in that? Lila: there's a travel conference in Hartford that same weekend. Maybe I could arrange to attend? Conrad: is that a yes? Lila: it's a maybe that feels dangerously close to yes. The messages from Hartford were worse than I'd imagined. Conrad: seeing you tonight was like stepping back in time. You're even more beautiful now than you were at 18. Lila: I can't stop thinking about dinner, or what happened after. Conrad: when you kissed me in that hotel lobby, everything else disappeared. It was just us again. Lila: this is crazy. I'm a married woman with a family. Conrad: but are you happy? When you're with me, you light up in a way I bet you haven't in years. Lila: that's not fair. Conrad: neither is settling for a life that doesn't fulfill you. The most recent messages were the most damaging. Lila: I've been thinking about what you said, about old feelings never really dying. Conrad: and? Lila: I think you might be right. What we had was real, Conrad. Maybe the realest thing I've ever felt. Conrad: so what do we do about it? Lila: I don't know. I need time to figure things out. Conrad: take all the time you need. I've waited 25 years. I can wait a little longer. Lila: Miles has been so distant lately. Sometimes I think he wouldn't even notice if I disappeared. Conrad: his loss would be my gain. I closed the laptop and sat in our kitchen, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life. Wedding photos on the refrigerator, Danny's college acceptance letters still pinned to the bulletin board, vacation souvenirs from trips we'd taken when we were younger and still believed in forever. My phone rang. It was my old friend Tommy Coach Barrick, who ran the boxing gym where I'd trained in college. I'd kept up with boxing casually over the years, hitting the heavy bag when work stress got too intense. "Miles, you sound like hell," Coach said after I answered. "Just having a rough day. Want to talk about it over some pad work? Nothing clears the head like throwing punches." Actually, that sounds perfect. An hour later, I was at Coach's gym, working out my frustration on the heavy bag. Coach was in his mid-50s, a former Golden Gloves champion who'd transitioned into training younger fighters. He had the weathered look of someone who'd taken his share of hits, but kept getting back up. "So what's eating you?" he asked, as I paused to catch my breath. I found myself telling him everything: the overheard phone call, the messages, the growing certainty that my marriage was falling apart. Coach listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or offering small sounds of understanding. "What are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront her, but another part wants to see how far she'll take this." "You want my advice?" I nodded. "Don't do anything stupid, but don't be stupid either, if you know what I mean. You're a smart guy, Miles. Use that brain of yours." That evening, Lila came home later than usual, claiming she'd stopped by Sally's house to discuss weekend plans. She seemed distracted during dinner, checking her phone frequently and offering minimal responses to my attempts at conversation. "How was your day?" I asked. "Fine. Busy. You know how it is." "Any interesting clients?" "Not really. Just the usual requests for European tours and Caribbean cruises." She was lying smoothly, easily, like she'd been practicing. I wondered how long she'd been deceiving me and what other truths I'd been blind to. After dinner, she disappeared upstairs with her phone, claiming she needed to catch up on some work emails. I heard her voice again through the bedroom window as I took out the trash, the same musical laugh, the same intimate tone I'd heard the night before. This time I didn't listen. I already knew what I'd hear. Instead, I went to my home office and started making plans. The next few days passed in a strange sort of suspended animation. Lila continued her routine: work, phone calls with Sally, evening conversations behind closed doors, while I played the role of the oblivious husband. But underneath my calm exterior, I was systematically documenting everything. I started with the financial records. As the primary earner in our household, I'd always handled most of our banking and investments. Lila had access to our joint accounts, but she rarely paid attention to the details. She preferred to focus on her business finances while leaving our personal budget to me. What I discovered was illuminating. Over the past 3 months, Lila had made several unusual purchases. Expensive lingerie from boutiques I'd never heard of, restaurant charges in Hartford on dates that didn't match any business conferences I could verify, and a series of cash withdrawals that totaled nearly $2,000. I cross-referenced these expenses with her calendar and social media activity. The patterns were clear. Every unusual purchase coincided with increased messaging activity with Conrad, and every business trip she'd taken in the past 3 months had occurred in cities where Conrad had been traveling for gym-related business. The evidence was damning, but I needed more. I decided to pay a visit to Conrad's gym. Hale's Fitness was located in a converted warehouse in the industrial section of downtown Cranebrook. The building had been a textile factory decades ago, and Conrad had done an impressive job converting it into a modern fitness facility. The exterior was painted matte black with silver lettering, giving it an upscale, masculine aesthetic. I parked across the street and observed the facility for an hour during the lunch rush. Conrad was easy to spot. He moved through the gym with the confident swagger of someone who owned the space, greeting members by name and offering training advice. He wore a fitted black t-shirt with the gym's logo and athletic shorts that showed off legs that were still muscular and strong. He looked good. Better than I did, certainly. While I'd maintained a reasonable level of fitness over the years, I'd also developed the soft edges that come with middle age and desk work. Conrad looked like he could still play high school football. I watched him interact with female gym members, noting the easy charm and flirtatious smile that had probably made him popular in high school. Several women lingered near him longer than necessary, laughing at comments I couldn't hear, finding excuses to touch his arm or shoulder during conversations. This was the man my wife was falling in love with, all over again. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. I created fake social media profiles to monitor both Lila and Conrad more closely. Using a variation of my middle name and my mother's maiden name, I created accounts on the platforms where they were most active. It took some careful work to build believable profiles, adding photos of a generic middle-aged man I found through stock photo sites, creating a plausible backstory, and gradually building connections with people in their networks. Within a few days, I was able to follow their public posts and see their interactions with mutual friends. What I learned made my situation even worse. Conrad had been posting increasingly romantic content, sunset photos with captions about second chances, motivational quotes about fighting for what you believe in, and workout videos that seemed designed to showcase his physique. The comments on these posts revealed that several people in their high school network were aware of his renewed connection with Lila. One comment thread was particularly revealing. Jennifer Walsh. "Someone's looking good lately. New girlfriend?" Conrad. "Just focusing on the important things in life." Jennifer. "I heard through the grapevine that you reconnected with Lila Harwood. You two were so cute together in high school." Conrad. "Some connections are worth waiting for." Jennifer. "Isn't she married, though?" Conrad. "Life's complicated, but the heart wants what it wants." The casual way he discussed pursuing a married woman infuriated me. There was no acknowledgement of the damage he might cause, no consideration for me or Danny or the life Lila and I had built together. To him, I was just an obstacle between him and something he wanted. Lila's posts were more subtle but equally telling. She'd started sharing articles about following your dreams and never settling for less than you deserve. Her photos showed her looking younger and more vibrant than she had in months. New hairstyles, flattering outfits, genuine smiles that I realized I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. But it was the private messages I intercepted through the tablet sync that provided the most damaging evidence. Conrad. "I can't stop thinking about Hartford. When you fell asleep in my arms, it felt like coming home." Lila. "I know. I haven't felt that peaceful in years." Conrad. "We could have that every night if you wanted." Lila. "It's not that simple. I have a life here, responsibilities." Conrad. "What kind of life is it if you're not happy?" Lila. "Miles is a good man. He doesn't deserve this." Conrad. "But what about what you deserve? You've spent 20 years taking care of everyone else. When do you get to live for yourself?" Lila. "Sometimes I think about what you said about starting fresh somewhere new." Conrad. "We could do it, Lila. I've been looking into selling the gym. There are opportunities in Colorado, places where we could start that adventure travel business we used to dream about." Lila. "You'd really give up everything here?" Conrad. "For you, in a heartbeat." Lila. "I need to think." Conrad. "Take your time. But don't think so long that we miss our chance again." The messages revealed that they'd been physical together, that Conrad was planning to relocate for her, and that Lila was seriously considering leaving our marriage. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected, but it also clarified my situation. I wasn't fighting to save a marriage anymore. I was preparing for its end. That weekend, Lila announced she was going to visit Sally for their monthly girls' night. Dinner, wine, and what she called therapeutic complaining about our husbands. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, but she was already reaching for her car keys. "Of course not. You two have fun." After she left, I drove to Sally's neighborhood and parked where I could see the house. Sally's car was in the driveway, but Lila's wasn't. I waited for 2 hours, but Lila never showed up. Instead, I followed my instincts and drove to Conrad's gym. It was closed for the evening, but I recognized Lila's car in the parking lot behind the building. I sat in my truck across the street, watching the darkened windows of the gym and feeling the last of my illusions crumble. Whatever conversation I might have had with Lila about counseling or working on our marriage was now pointless. She'd made her choice, and it wasn't me. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Having so much fun with Sally, probably won't be home until late. Don't wait up." The casual cruelty of the lie hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just cheating, She was lying about it with practiced ease, using our mutual friend as cover for her deception. I drove home and spent the evening researching divorce law in Massachusetts, asset protection strategies, and the legal implications of adultery in marriage dissolution cases. By the time Lila came home at nearly midnight, hair slightly messed, makeup refreshed, wearing a satisfied smile, I had a plan. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to my lawyer, David Chen, who specialized in family law. I'd known David since college, and I trusted him to handle sensitive matters with discretion. "I need to see you this week," I told him. "It's about Lila." "I'm sorry to hear that, Miles. How bad is it?" "Bad enough. I have evidence." "Bring everything you have. We'll discuss your options." The second call was to my bank. As the primary account holder on our joint accounts, I had certain privileges that Lila might not have considered. "I need to discuss adding some security measures to my accounts," I told the branch manager. "I'm concerned about unauthorized access." "Of course, Mr. Harwood. We can set up alerts and additional verification requirements for large transactions." The third call was to my boss, requesting a few days of personal time. "Everything okay, Miles?" he asked. "Just some family matters I need to handle. Nothing that can't be resolved." That afternoon, I met with David in his downtown office. He was a few years younger than me, with the sharp, analytical mind that had made him successful in family law. His office walls were lined with law books and framed degrees, but also family photos that reminded clients he understood the personal cost of divorce. I laid out everything I'd discovered: the messages, the financial irregularities, the lies about her whereabouts, the evidence of physical infidelity. David reviewed the materials with professional detachment, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "This is pretty comprehensive," he said finally. "Massachusetts recognizes adultery as grounds for divorce, which could impact the settlement negotiations. The fact that you've documented everything so thoroughly works in your favor." "What are my options?" "Several. You could confront her and attempt counseling, though based on what I'm seeing here, she's pretty far down this path. You could file immediately for divorce on grounds of adultery. Or you could continue gathering evidence while protecting your financial interests. What would you recommend?" David leaned back in his chair, considering. "Honestly, I'd recommend securing your assets first, then confronting her. Give her a chance to end this affair and work on the marriage, but do it from a position of strength. If she chooses to continue with this Conrad character, you'll be prepared." "How do I secure the assets?" "You're the primary earner and the primary account holder on most of your joint accounts. We can legally move funds to individual accounts in your name, especially if you have reason to believe she might drain the accounts or make large unauthorized purchases. We just need to be careful about how we do it." "And if she refuses to end the affair?" "Then you file for divorce, and with this evidence, you're likely to receive a favorable settlement. The house, the majority of the assets, possibly alimony from her if her business income exceeds yours during the proceedings." I left David's office feeling something I hadn't experienced in weeks: control. That evening, Lila seemed unusually affectionate, perhaps feeling guilty about her deception. She cooked my favorite dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and suggested we watch a movie together. "I feel like we haven't connected much lately," she said, curling up next to me on the couch. "I miss this." The irony was overwhelming. She was trying to assuage her guilt by being a better wife, not realizing that her betrayal had already ended our marriage in my mind. "I miss it too," I said, and meant it. I missed the woman she used to be, before Conrad, before the lies, before she decided that 22 years of marriage was worth sacrificing for a high school fantasy. "Maybe we should plan a trip," she suggested. "Somewhere we've never been. I could get us a great deal through work." "That sounds nice." But even as I agreed, I was thinking about the legal papers David would be preparing, the asset transfers that would begin the next day, and the conversation that would end our marriage forever. Lila fell asleep against my shoulder during the movie, and I found myself studying her face in the flickering light of the television. She looked peaceful, younger, like the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. But I knew now that this version of her was as much an illusion as the marriage we'd been pretending to maintain. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I woke before dawn and drove to the bank as soon as it opened. The transfers David had recommended were straightforward but would send a clear message. I knew about the affair, and I was protecting myself financially. I moved the majority of our savings to a new individual account, leaving enough in our joint account to cover household expenses for a few weeks. I also called our credit card companies and placed fraud alerts on our shared accounts, requiring my authorization for purchases over $500. These weren't punitive measures, not yet. They were protective ones, designed to prevent Lila from draining our accounts if she decided to run off with Conrad or fund some romantic getaway with our money. By the time I returned home, Lila was getting ready for work. She seemed relaxed, humming while she applied her makeup, completely unaware that her financial access had just been severely limited. "You're up early," she said, kissing my cheek in a gesture that felt like a betrayal. "Couldn't sleep. Decided to run some errands." "Everything okay?" "Just the usual stuff. Bills, banking, boring husband things." She laughed, and the sound made my chest ache. How many times had she laughed like that with Conrad? How many intimate moments had she shared with him while pretending everything was normal with me? That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Lila, and she sounded panicked. "Miles, there's something wrong with our credit card. It was declined when I tried to buy lunch, and the bank says there's some kind of hold on the account." "Really? That's strange. What kind of hold?" "They said something about fraud protection, but I don't understand. I've been using this card for years." "I'll call them and sort it out," I said, knowing full well what they'd told her. Probably just a computer glitch. "Okay, but can you handle it today? I have a client dinner tonight and I need to be able to pay for it." A client dinner. Another lie, delivered so smoothly I almost admired her skill. "Of course. Where are you taking them?" "That new Italian place downtown. Rossini's, I think it's called." Rossini's was expensive, romantic, definitely not the kind of place for a business dinner. It was exactly where someone might take a lover for an intimate evening. "Sounds nice. I'm sure they'll be impressed." After we hung up, I called Coach Barrick. "I need a favor," I said. "Can you meet me at Rossini's tonight around 7? Just for a drink at the bar." "Sure, but why?" "I'll explain when I see you." That evening, Coach and I sat at the bar at Rossini's, nursing beers and pretending to watch the baseball game on the television above the bar. From our position, we had a clear view of the dining room. Lila and Conrad arrived at 7:30, and seeing them together in person was worse than I'd imagined. They moved like a couple, his hand on the small of her back as the hostess led them to their table, her fingers brushing his arm as she laughed at something he said. They sat close together, leaning in for intimate conversation, sharing food from each other's plates. They looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, in a way that Lila and I hadn't looked in years. "That's her," I told Coach quietly. He studied them for a moment. "And that's the guy?" "That's him. He's got the look of someone who's never been punched in the face." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Not yet, anyway. "What's your plan?" "I'm going to give her one chance to end this and save our marriage. If she refuses..." I shrugged. Then I guess it was over anyway. We finished our drinks and left before Lila and Conrad noticed us. But I'd seen enough. Whatever conversation we were going to have, I now knew exactly how invested she was in this affair. The next evening, I decided to force the issue. Lila was in our kitchen, preparing what looked like a romantic dinner for two: candles, wine, her best china. She'd changed into a dress I'd never seen before, something that hugged her curves and made her look stunning. "Are we expecting company?" I asked. She looked startled, like she'd forgotten I lived there. "Oh no. I just thought it would be nice to have a proper dinner together. We've been eating in front of the television too much lately." Another lie. The dinner was clearly meant for Conrad, probably planned for later in the evening after I'd gone to bed or left the house. I decided this was the moment. "Lila, we need to talk." Something in my tone made her freeze. She set down the wine bottle she'd been opening and turned to face me with the expression of someone who knew their world was about to change. "About what?" "About Conrad Hale." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny everything, but then her shoulders sagged in defeat. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, how long has this been going on?" She moved to the kitchen island, gripping its edge like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I've seen the messages, Lila. I know about Hartford, about the lies, about the romantic dinners and the plans to run away together." Her eyes widened. "You've been reading my private messages? Your tablet syncs to my laptop, remember? We set that up years ago when we trusted each other." She had the grace to look ashamed. "Miles, I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know. I'm confused. Seeing Conrad again brought back all these feelings I thought were gone forever." "And what about the feelings you have for me, for our marriage, for the life we built together?" She was quiet for a long moment, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I love you, Miles. I do. But I'm not sure I'm in love with you anymore." The honesty was brutal, but I appreciated it more than the lies she'd been telling. "So, what do you want to do?" "I don't know," she repeated. "Conrad makes me feel alive again, like I'm the person I used to be before I got caught up in responsibilities and routines. With him, I remember what it felt like to dream about the future instead of just managing the present." "And you can't feel that way with me?" She looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Can you honestly say you've been happy, Miles? Really happy? Or have we just been going through the motions?" The question hit harder than I'd expected because there was truth in it. We had been going through the motions, both of us. But I'd thought that was normal, the natural evolution of a long marriage. I hadn't realized she saw it as a prison. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "I need time to figure things out." "How much time?" "I don't know." "Well, while you're figuring things out, I've made some decisions of my own." Her expression sharpened. "What kind of decisions?" "I've moved our savings to an account in my name. I've put holds on our credit cards, and I've spoken to a lawyer." "You did what?" Her voice rose to nearly a shout. "I protected myself, Lila. What did you expect me to do? Sit here and wait while you decide whether you want to be married to me or run off with your high school boyfriend? You had no right to freeze my access to our money. Actually, I had every right. I'm the primary earner and the primary account holder. And given that you've been spending our money on hotel rooms and romantic dinners with another man, I think my caution was justified." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I never thought you'd do something like this. I never thought you'd cheat on me, so I guess we're both full of surprises." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of the candles flickering and the wine breathing in the bottle she'd opened for a dinner that would never happen. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to choose. End the affair, cut contact with Conrad, and let's try to rebuild our marriage. Or don't, and we'll proceed with the divorce." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You're either married to me or you're not. There's no middle ground here. And if I choose Conrad, then you'll discover that hope he can fund your luxury life, because I won't be doing it anymore." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's cruel. What's cruel is lying to your husband for months while you carry on an affair. What's cruel is using our joint accounts to finance your betrayal. What's cruel is making me feel like I was going crazy while you pretended everything was normal. Tears were streaming down her face now. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. The question is whether you're going to stop. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I need to think. How long? A few days, maybe a week. Fine. But while you're thinking, Conrad is not welcome in this house, and you're not spending any more of our money on this affair. Are we clear? She nodded reluctantly. And Lila, if I find out you're still seeing him while you're supposedly deciding, the choice will be made for you. What does that mean? It means I'll file for divorce immediately, and with the evidence I have, you won't like the settlement terms. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing this new version of me, the one who fought back instead of just absorbing whatever she decided to dish out. I never knew you could be this hard, she said. I never knew you could be this selfish. She left the kitchen without another word, taking her purse and car keys. A few minutes later, I heard her car pull out of the driveway. I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the romantic dinner she'd planned for another man, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: relief. At least now we were being honest with each other. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone immediately. Your wife is with me. We're talking about her future. Back off or you'll regret it. Conrad had just made his first mistake. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and then replied, "Looking forward to meeting you in person soon." The war had officially begun. The next few days passed in tense silence. Lila came home late each night, offering no explanations for her whereabouts, and left early each morning before I could attempt conversation. We moved around each other like polite strangers, maintaining the basic courtesies of shared living space, while avoiding anything that might lead to actual communication. I used the time to strengthen my position. David helped me document everything properly for potential divorce proceedings, while I continued monitoring Lila's digital communications and building a comprehensive record of her affair. What I discovered during this period made me realize that my confrontation had only driven the affair deeper underground, not ended it. Conrad. He knows about us. He's frozen her accounts and threatened to divorce her if she doesn't end things. Sally. I told her this would happen eventually. Miles isn't as clueless as she thought. Conrad. She's scared. She doesn't know what to do. Sally. What she should do is get a good lawyer. Massachusetts is a no-fault state. She could get half of everything regardless of the affair. Conrad. Can you help her? She trusts you. Sally. Of course. That's what friends are for. The message thread revealed that Sally Morse, Lila's supposed best friend, was actively encouraging the affair and helping them strategize against me. The woman I'd known for 15 years, who'd been a guest at our dinner table countless times, who'd been Danny's honorary aunt, was working to destroy my marriage. But more disturbing was what the messages revealed about their plans. Lila. Miles gave me an ultimatum. Choose him or you. Conrad. And what did you tell him? Lila. That I need time to think, but honestly, I've already decided. I just need to figure out how to minimize the damage. Conrad. What kind of damage? Lila. Financial mostly. He's got control of everything right now. Sally thinks I should see a lawyer before I make any moves. Conrad. And after that? Lila. After that we can be together properly. No more sneaking around. Conrad. I can't wait. I've already started looking at properties in Colorado. There's a perfect spot for the adventure travel business we talked about. Lila. You're really serious about that? Conrad. Very serious. We're going to have the life we should have had 25 years ago. Reading these messages, I realized that my ultimatum had been meaningless. Lila had already chosen Conrad. She was just trying to figure out how to leave me with maximum financial benefit to herself. The betrayal cut deep, but it also clarified my position. I was no longer trying to save my marriage. I was preparing for war. That Thursday evening, I decided to take a more direct approach. I drove to Conrad's gym just before closing time. The parking lot was nearly empty, with only a few cars belonging to the late evening workout crowd. Conrad's silver Mustang was parked in a spot marked Owner near the front entrance. I waited until the last customers left, then walked into the gym. Conrad was behind the front desk, counting the day's cash receipts. He looked up when I entered, and I saw recognition flash across his face, followed quickly by wariness. "We're closed," he said. "I know. I wanted to talk to you privately." He straightened to his full height, which was slightly taller than my 5'10". He had the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym, but there was something soft around his eyes that suggested he'd never been in a real fight. "I don't think we have anything to talk about." "I think we do. You sent me a text message the other night. Something about regretting it if I didn't back off. Look, man, I don't want any trouble, but Lila's unhappy, and she has a right to make her own choices. She's also married. To me. For 22 years. Marriages end, people grow apart, it happens. Not when there's someone actively working to destroy them from the inside." Conrad moved around the desk, positioning himself between me and the exit. It was a subtle power play, but I noticed it. "I'm not destroying anything that wasn't already broken," he said. "Lila told me how things have been between you two. You've been roommates for years. And you think you're the solution to her problems? I think I make her happy. When's the last time you could say that?" The question stung because I couldn't answer it honestly. When was the last time I'd made Lila truly happy? When was the last time we'd laughed together or planned something exciting or looked forward to spending time alone together? But that didn't give him the right to pursue a married woman. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to end this affair. You're going to tell Lila that you made a mistake, that you're not interested in destroying a marriage, and that she should work things out with her husband." Conrad laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Or what? Or I'll make your life very uncomfortable. Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his size and fitness. "You think you can scare me? I've been dealing with guys like you my whole life, middle-aged, out-of-shape husbands who think they can bully their way out of their problems." "Guys like me?" "Yeah, guys who let their marriages die through neglect and then get angry when someone else shows their wife what she's been missing." The comment hit its target, but it also triggered something in me that had been building for weeks. Without fully deciding to do it, I stepped forward and shoved him hard in the chest. Conrad stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, but his expression shifted from condescending to dangerous. "You just made a big mistake," he said. He swung at me with a right hook that would have connected if I hadn't spent the last few weeks training with Coach Barrick. I ducked under his punch and drove my fist into his solar plexus, doubling him over. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Conrad was strong and fit, but he fought like someone who'd learned from movies rather than experience. His punches were wild and telegraphed, easy to avoid or counter. When it was over, he was sitting on the floor with a bloody nose and a split lip, looking up at me with a mixture of shock and fear. "Stay away from my wife," I said. I walked out of the gym, my knuckles aching and my heart pounding, feeling more alive than I had in months. But I knew the fight had only escalated things. The next morning, Lila confronted me before I'd even finished my coffee. "Conrad told me what you did," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You attacked him at his own business. I defended myself. He threw the first punch. He said you threatened him and then assaulted him. He's lying, but I'm not surprised. Men who pursue other men's wives aren't usually known for their honesty. This has to stop, Miles. You can't go around beating people up because you're angry about our marriage." "Our marriage? Is that what we're calling your affair now?" She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and for the first time in days, she looked directly at me instead of through me. "I've made my decision," she said quietly, "and I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. Hearing them spoken aloud made them real in a way that all the evidence and suspicion hadn't. Because of Conrad? Because I'm not happy, Miles. I haven't been happy for a long time, and I don't think you have been either. So you're leaving me for him. I'm leaving you for me. Conrad is he's helping me remember who I used to be. And who you used to be is someone who breaks promises, someone who lies to people who trust them. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way. You made choices, Lila. Every step of the way you chose to lie to me, to sneak around behind my back, to spend our money on your affair. Those weren't accidents. She was crying now, but I felt no sympathy. The time for sympathy had passed when she decided to prioritize her high school boyfriend over her marriage. "What happens now?" I asked. "I've contacted a lawyer. We'll file for divorce and work out the details." "What about the house? Our assets? Danny's college expenses?" "We'll figure it out fairly." "Fairly according to whom? You? The woman who's been lying to me for months?" "Miles, please, let's try to do this with some dignity." Dignity. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about dignity? You've been parading your affair around town while pretending to be a devoted wife. You've been using our friends to cover for your lies. You've been planning to leave me while still sharing my bed and spending my money. Where was the dignity in any of that?" She stood up from the table, her composure cracking. "I know you're angry, but..." "I'm not angry, Lila. I'm done." "What does that mean?" "It means you want a divorce? Fine. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. Don't expect me to pretend this is some mutual decision where we both bear equal responsibility. You destroyed our marriage for a fantasy, and now you get to live with the consequences." "What consequences?" I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Hope he can fund your luxury life because I won't be doing it anymore." Her face went pale. "Miles, you can't just..." "I can't what? Protect myself from someone who's already betrayed me? Watch this." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "I've already transferred the majority of our assets to accounts in my name. The house is in my name. Your business line of credit was guaranteed by our joint assets, which are now my individual assets. Your credit cards are canceled. Your access to our investment accounts is revoked." "You can't do that." "I already did it, and it's all perfectly legal since I'm the primary earner and account holder, and I have documented evidence of your adultery and financial infidelity." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "Who are you? This isn't the man I married." "The man you married was a fool who trusted his wife. Consider this my evolution." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "My lawyer will hear about this." "I'm sure he will. Tell him I said good luck." After she left, I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the silence of our empty house, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was officially on, and I intended to win. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal maneuvering and escalating hostility. Lila hired Margaret Thornton, one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the county, a woman known for her scorched earth tactics and her ability to extract maximum settlements from wealthy husbands. But Margaret had never dealt with a case where the husband had documented evidence of adultery and had moved first to protect his assets. David Chen proved to be worth every penny of his considerable fees. Within days of Lila filing for divorce, he had presented the court with a comprehensive case that painted Lila as an unfaithful spouse who had used marital assets to fund her extramarital affair. The evidence was overwhelming. The messages between Lila and Conrad, the financial records showing her suspicious expenditures, the timeline of her lies about business trips, and even testimony from witnesses who had seen them together at restaurants and hotels. But it was the revelation about Sally Morse's role in the affair that provided the most dramatic twist. David's investigation had uncovered that Sally hadn't just been covering for Lila's affair, she had been actively orchestrating it. The messages we discovered revealed a much darker motivation than simple friendship. Sally: I've been thinking about what you said about being unhappy. Lila: I shouldn't have complained so much about Miles. He's not a bad husband. Sally: But is he the right husband? You're only 43, Lila. You could have a whole different life if you wanted it. Lila: It's not that simple. We have history, responsibilities. Sally: What if I told you that Conrad Hale has been asking about you? Lila: Conrad? How do you know Conrad? Sally: I ran into him at the mall last month. He remembered me from high school, and when I mentioned your name, his whole face lit up. He said he'd always wondered what happened to you. Lila: Really? Sally: He's single now, you know, divorced, and he looks amazing. Still has that same smile that made half the girls in our class fall in love with him. Sally: I might have mentioned that you weren't entirely happy in your marriage. Lila: Sally, you didn't. Sally: I just told him the truth, that you're a beautiful, intelligent woman who deserves to be appreciated. The messages revealed that Sally had been the one to orchestrate Lila and Conrad's initial reconnection, feeding Conrad information about Lila's marriage and encouraging both of them to pursue their unfinished business. But the most damaging revelation was Sally's motivation. She had been having her own affair, and she needed Lila's marriage to implode to provide cover for her own infidelity. Sally: If you and Miles get divorced, it will be so much easier for me to explain why I'm out so much. Tom's been getting suspicious about my evening meetings. Lila: You want me to blow up my marriage to cover for your affair? Sally: I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do, but if you're going to be unhappy anyway, why not at least get something good out of it? When I read those messages, I realized that Lila had been manipulated almost as much as I had been betrayed. Sally had exploited her friend's marital dissatisfaction to serve her own agenda, using Lila's affair as camouflage for her own cheating. It didn't excuse Lila's choices, but it added another layer of betrayal to an already complex situation. I decided that Sally needed to face consequences too. On a Tuesday evening, I drove to Sally's house and knocked on the door. Her husband, Tom, answered, a decent man who worked in construction and coached Little League baseball on weekends. Miles, good to see you. Come on in. Sally's in the kitchen. Actually, Tom, I need to talk to both of you about something important. Sally appeared in the hallway, and when she saw me, her face went white. What's this about? Tom asked. I pulled out a folder containing printed copies of Sally's messages with Lila and Conrad, including the ones where she discussed her own affair and her strategy of using Lila's divorce as cover. It's about the fact that your wife has been orchestrating affairs, both Lila's and her own. Tom took the folder with confusion, but as he read through the messages, his expression changed from bewilderment to anger to devastation. Sally, he said quietly, is this true? Sally tried to deny it at first, then to minimize it, then to blame everyone else. But the evidence was undeniable, and Tom was no fool. By the time I left their house, Sally's marriage was over, and she was no longer in a position to help Lila with her divorce strategy. But my most satisfying revenge was yet to come. Conrad's gym had been struggling financially even before I discovered the affair. The messages between him and Lila revealed that he was behind on his lease payments, owed money to equipment suppliers, and was in danger of losing his business license due to various code violations. I spent a week making phone calls. I contacted his landlord and informed them about the after-hours incidents at the gym, including the fight we'd had, and the evidence that he'd been using the space for personal meetings with married women. I reached out to his equipment suppliers and shared information about his financial instability, leading several of them to demand immediate payment of outstanding invoices. I reported code violations to the city health department, the fire marshal, and the building inspector. Within 2 weeks, Conrad's gym was shut down for safety violations. His equipment was repossessed for non-payment, and his lease was terminated for breach of contract. But the final blow came when I discovered that Conrad had been lying to Lila about his financial situation. The messages revealed that he'd been presenting himself as a successful businessman who was choosing to sell his gym to start fresh with her in Colorado. The reality was that he was bankrupt, had no savings, and had been counting on Lila's divorce settlement to fund their new life together. When Lila learned the truth, that the man she'd destroyed her marriage for was essentially a con artist who'd seen her as a meal ticket, she was devastated. She called me on a Thursday evening 3 weeks after she'd moved out of our house and into a small apartment downtown. "Miles, I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About everything. About us, about the divorce, about the mistakes I've made. It's a little late for that conversation, don't you think?" "Please, just give me 1 hour." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked older than she had just a month earlier. The stress of the divorce proceedings, the collapse of her affair, and the loss of her best friend had taken a visible toll. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "I know you hate me," she said without preamble. "I don't hate you, Lila. I'm disappointed in you, but I don't hate you." Conrad wasn't who I thought he was. No kidding. He lied about everything: his business, his finances, his feelings for me. He was just looking for someone to bankroll his fantasies. And you were looking for someone to make you feel young again. You both got what you wanted, at least temporarily. I threw away 22 years for nothing. You threw away 22 years because you decided a fantasy was more important than reality. The fact that the fantasy turned out to be a lie doesn't change the choice you made. She started crying then, quiet tears that she wiped away with a napkin. "Is there any chance you could forgive me? That we could try again?" I looked at her across the small table, this woman I'd loved for more than half my adult life, and felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not even pity. Just a kind of empty sadness for what we'd lost and what could never be recovered. "No," I said simply. "There's no going back from this." "Miles, please." "You made your choice, Lila. You chose to lie to me for months. You chose to betray our marriage vows. You chose to plan a future with another man while still married to me. Those weren't mistakes or accidents. They were deliberate decisions, and they have consequences. But I was manipulated. Sally didn't force you to kiss Conrad in that hotel lobby. Sally didn't force you to spend our money on romantic dinners with him. Sally didn't force you to plan to leave me for him. You made those choices." She nodded slowly, accepting the truth of what I was saying. "What happens now?" "Now we finish the divorce. You get what the court decides you're entitled to, which won't be much given the circumstances. You figure out how to rebuild your life without me, and I do the same without you." "And you'll be okay?" I considered the question seriously. Would I be okay? The answer surprised me. "Yeah, I think I will be. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. I'm not waiting for someone else to decide whether I'm worth loving or worth staying faithful to. I'm just free." She flinched at the word but didn't argue. We finished our coffee in silence, and when we parted ways in the parking lot, I knew it was the last real conversation we'd ever have. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. The judge awarded me the house, the majority of our assets, and a settlement that left Lila with enough to start over, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. Conrad disappeared from Cranebrook shortly after his gym closed, reportedly moving back in with his parents in another state. Lila never heard from him again. Sally's marriage ended in a bitter divorce of its own, and she moved away from town to escape the scandal. As for me, I kept the house but sold most of the furniture that held memories of our life together. I redecorated in a style that was entirely my own, bought new clothes that made me feel confident, and started going to Coach Barrick's gym regularly. 6 months after the divorce was final, I ran into Danny at a coffee shop near the university. She was home for winter break, and she looked surprised to see me. "Dad, you look different." "Different how?" "Happier, I guess. Younger." We sat together for an hour, talking more honestly than we had in years. She admitted that she'd known about her mother's affair before I did, and that she'd been angry at both of us, at Lila for cheating and at me for being oblivious to it. "I'm sorry I said those things about you being a loser," she said. "I was frustrated with the whole situation, but I took it out on you. You weren't wrong, though. I had become complacent. I'd stopped fighting for what I wanted. And now?" I smiled, thinking about the new life I was building, the plans I was making, the sense of possibility that had replaced the resignation I'd lived with for so long. Now I remember what it feels like to be the hero of my own story, instead of a supporting character in someone else's. A year later, I was in a relationship with a woman named Jennifer, a fellow financial analyst who shared my love of boxing and my appreciation for quiet evenings at home. She was divorced too, and she understood the value of honesty and commitment in ways that only someone who'd been betrayed could understand. Lila had moved to Florida, where she worked for a large travel agency and lived in a small apartment near the beach. We exchanged Christmas cards and the occasional email about Danny, but we were strangers now, connected only by our shared history and our daughter. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about the life we'd had together, or if she regretted the choices that had destroyed it. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all. I was too busy living my own life, finally, after years of living hers. On the anniversary of the day I'd first overheard her talking to Conrad, I was sitting on my back porch with Jennifer, watching the sunset and planning a weekend trip to the mountains. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I heard about your divorce. I'm sorry things didn't work out with Lila. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands, call me. Conrad." I showed the message to Jennifer, who laughed. "Is he serious?" "Apparently. What are you going to do?" I deleted the message without responding and put my arm around Jennifer. "Nothing," I said. "Some people never learn that actions have consequences, but that's not my problem anymore." And it wasn't. For the first time in years, other people's drama was not my problem. I had my own life to live, my own happiness to pursue, my own future to build. I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. And I was definitely better.